Radiohead's Creep should never have existed, let alone become Radiohead's biggest song. It was recorded by accident, the band members tried to sabotage the recording, and they ended up despising the song. They never initially planned to release it, and it even got into some legal trouble. It's a miracle that the song ever saw the light of day and became as big as it has done. I've come to where Radiohead recorded Creep, along with their debut album, Pablo Honey. Lovely Chipping Norton in the Cotswolds, home to renowned antique shops, Jeremy Clarkson, and this dentist studio. Although it wasn't always a dentist studio, whatever that is. It used to be an actual studio, where people, recorded songs.
It was purchased in 1971 by brothers Richard and Mike Vernon, with the money made from producing Fleetwood Mac's Albatross. Over the course of just under 30 years, it saw some legendary songs recorded. Bay City Rollers' Bye Bye Baby, Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street, The Proclaimers' I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles, I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight by Cutting Crew. Duran Duran recorded the majority of their debut album here. And in 1992, Radiohead, local to the area, recorded their debut album, Pablo Honey.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? They recorded it in this building, in this building here. This is where Creep came from, in this building. So cool, so nerdy. So they formed less than an hour away from here in Abingdon. Thom Yorke, Jonny Greenwood, Colin Greenwood, Ed O'Brien and Philip Selway. That lineup would remain throughout the band's entire career, by the way. They originally called themselves On a Friday because of the day they'd always get together to rehearse, which was on Fridays.
Soon they had signed to EMI, changed their name to Radiohead, inspired by a Talking Heads song, and were ready to record an album. Now, EMI, who owned Parlophone in the UK and Capitol in the US, wanted to crack the American market with this record. So they brought in two American producers, Sean Slade and Paul Calderi. Initially, they were brought in to record two songs and hopefully find Radiohead's first single. And boy, were they in for a shock when they arrived. Calderi called the band, quote, desperately inexperienced.
They also weren't fans of the two songs EMI had suggested for the band's first single, Inside My Head and Lurgy, and the band weren't fans of them either. It was off to a very slow and worrying start. But then the band started playing another song, a song that Thom Yorke had written in the late 80s, a song he supposedly wrote about a girl he fancied, like really, really fancied, and the powerlessness of not being able to do anything about it, as well as the feelings of alienation and isolation that come with it. And this was a throwaway song. Thom Yorke famously told Rolling Stone that he thought the lyrics were pretty crap. They had no intention of actually recording this song, and definitely no intention of including it on their album, let alone for it to be their debut single.
When they first played it, there came a moment which very nearly resulted in the song never being recorded. When they finished it, Thom Yorke mumbled something like, "That's our Scott Walker song," except I thought he said, "That's a Scott Walker song." Now, I was pretty familiar with Scott Walker, but geez, there's a lot of albums and I could have missed something. We walked out of the rehearsal that night and Sean said, too bad their best song's a cover.
So what did Thom Yorke mean by that? That's our Scott Walker song. Well, Scott Walker was a singer known for his emotive, crooning voice. So the band were probably just doing a parody of that style with Creep.
She smiles through the smoke.
So, thinking the song was a cover, the producers thought nothing more of it and just carried on. And the recording sessions were becoming difficult and arduous. Nothing seemed to be clicking. Even their own manager, Chris Hufford, described the music in those sessions as overblown, bombastic rock. In an attempt to raise some spirits, Calderi suggested playing that Scott Walker song again. And I imagine around this time it came to light that the song wasn't actually a cover, although some later legal troubles would suggest otherwise. More on that in a bit. So the band ran through the song, much to Jonny Greenwood's dismay.
We were asked to play some things to check the levels of the tape. I didn't like it. It stayed quiet, so I hit the guitar hard, really hard.
Yeah, so Greenwood wasn't a fan of the track and didn't want to play it, and through frustration tried to sabotage it, except that sabotage ended up being one of the defining and most loved elements of the song.
It gives the song so much attitude. It really wouldn't be the same without those attacks on the guitar. At the end, everyone in the place was silent for a moment, and then they burst into applause. I'd never had that happen before.
What the band didn't know, though, is that the producers had recorded that take. And that take, along with some added Jonny Greenwood piano and adjustments in the mix, is what you hear today. That was the song recorded. How mind-blowing is that? And that happened in there. That happened in that building right behind me.
With the song recorded, Slade and Colderry showed it around at EMI, and everyone loved it. It was decided Creep would be the band's debut single. The band even recorded a radio-friendly edit through Gritted Teeth.
So let's take stock. Already multiple reasons why the song had no business even existing, let alone being a hit. It wasn't even meant to be recorded. The producers thought it was a cover. Greenwood tried to sabotage it, and Yorke didn't like the lyrics. It's not exactly a typical winning formula. The next reason is that it didn't make much of an impact when it was released.
First released in September 1992, it sold just 6,000 copies, enough for it to reach number 78 on the UK singles chart, but certainly not enough to get anyone talking. BBC Radio 1 rejected it to begin with because it was too depressing, according to them. Then, something weird started happening. Creep was beginning to gain traction in just about every country outside of the UK. In the US, especially California, it was becoming a bit of an anthem, a slacker anthem, in the same way that Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit or Beck's Loser did. In fact, Live 105 in San Francisco named Creep as its top record of the year.
From there, it spread like crazy, from Chipping Norton to all around the world, all unknown to the band at this point as well.
EMI latched on and went all in on the promo for it. They immediately brought Radiohead over to the States for a tour supporting their label mates Belly. With the success of Creep, Pablo Honey performed exceptionally well too. And this is where things get sour, especially for Thom. Remember, he wasn't a fan of the song to begin with. In fact, the band didn't particularly like the entire album, but now with it exploding in popularity, it was forcing them to engage with it.
And so, on the road, already getting bored of playing the song, Thom was also getting hounded by music journalists, asking him if he really is a creep, and if he really stalked someone, or if he had a difficult childhood and all the rest of it. It was becoming a slog, touring an album they didn't particularly like, knowing that they had to play that one song every single evening.
Thom later told Rolling Stone magazine that when they play it, it feels like they're playing a cover song.
And that is a really, really interesting way to put it, because in my opinion, despite it being their biggest hit, Creep is the most un-Radiohead song in their entire discography. It's not reflective in the slightest of the maturity they would find with future releases. It's not reflective of the true band. Creep was a product of all the wrong things aligning at the same time. An inexperienced band in a studio happens to play this song that's been kicking around, producers forcing their hand to record it, labels latching on and pushing it to great heights. It had become a beast of its own, and that's not the Radiohead way. Everything with Radiohead is calculated and precise and controlled, and this wasn't. To be fair, it was their first ever single, so we have to give them some slack, and that experience was crucial in Radiohead developing as a band.
With the growing momentum, EMI wanted to reissue the single in the UK. We said, oh no, not in a million bloody years, over our dead bodies. We got back from America and just thought, why not? I suppose the song won in the end.
The song had become its own living, breathing thing. It had transcended Radiohead, and that's why it felt like playing a cover. And speaking of, there might be another reason for that.
Shortly after release, the song got into a bit of legal trouble. It was claimed that Creep lifted elements from a 1972 song, The Air That I Breathe, by Albert Hammond and Mike Hazelwood, made famous by a 1974 version by The Hollies. And to be fair, the similarities are undeniable. Again, they were young, they were inexperienced, they probably didn't spot it at the time. And I don't blame the band for turning their back on the song after that. Albert Hammond and Mike Hazelwood were added as composers to the song.
Despite all the inward-looking negativity surrounding this song, despite it completely overshadowing the rest of Radiohead's more sincere discography, it did of course launch the band to stardom and set them on their trajectory for greatness. So it deserves their thanks in that aspect. And I wonder if they had any idea that would happen when they were recording it in this building. And it's no wonder that they rarely play that first album live. because the band went through a dramatic transition in sound. The old stuff just isn't them anymore. Similar to how Arctic Monkeys completely reinvented themselves multiple times. I've made a video about their history and their dramatic change in sound. You can watch that here.